Hey guys, welcome to another Gedunk podcast. I'm here with Bobby Jones. We're excited to talk to you guys. We got some fun stuff to talk about today. But first, the elephant in the room. I am doing this on my phone because I I didn't drop really, but I knocked a heavy bag in my basement, like a Muay Thai punching bag. It fell out of the rafters and landed on my computer. So here we are. We're doing it by the phone, and I got to get my screen fixed on my laptop. So
It's amazing. This is a typical Dan Barkov story.
yeah,
The
man.
classic. I was beating up a heavy bag in my gym and it flew off and killed my computer.
I am not. I've drilled a whole bunch of holes in my rafters in my basement, and every 6 months or so, they fall out. So it's time to do some refurbishing, man. How you doing, Bobby?
I'm doing good. The news has been fascinating, and we're going to get into this whole mindset when it comes to conspiracies.
Yeah.
But I have had my mouth just agape watching TV and watching this unraveling in the magosphere over Jeffrey Epstein, the files, the conspiracies that fuel this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden, the lack of transparency. So just to summarize for people who are not following, I don't know how you can at this point, but Jeffrey Epstein was a unbelievably successful financier in the New York finance sector, filthy rich, and knew a lot of people, a lot of famous people, and had his own island, his own private jet. And this is back in the 80s and 90s where that really meant something. And this guy turns out would have these different parties, sex parties, etc., that involved underage girls, sex trafficking, all of these unbelievably wicked things. Now, his closest friend at the apex of all this was some guy named Donald John Trump. He's been on record saying it, and then even Trump back in the day was on record saying it. And so allegedly, and I'm going to start with the facts before we dive into the conspiracy. Allegedly, Epstein kept files on everybody that came to party with him. That much we know is somewhat true because there are flight logs and stuff like that that's actually documented that people have seen. Where this thing starts to go right hard is not only the people who were involved, but what they did with, sex trafficked and potentially underage sex trafficked people. The fact that he kept in contact with so many high level, highly important societal people, entertainment, business, government, etc. His former girlfriend, Jaylene Maxwell, she's in jail now. But she's not allowed really to testify. She wanted to come in front of the Congress. Congress voted yesterday to not let her do that, which is unbelievable and kind of crazy. So there's a lot of these different elements to this. But what's germinated from this, and this started actually on the right, was the magosphere saying, hey, we want to see the Epstein list of these people because I guarantee it's all pretty much Democrats, which, for their political means was something that was great. And we're talking back 2017, and then Epstein mysteriously committed suicide, again, allegedly in 2019 when Donald Trump was in office. And so that led to a whole other theory of conspiracies on the other side about why is he being silenced, this, that, and the other. Needless to say, Trump is now back in office, and he promised to release the files, but now all of a sudden he's not releasing the files. And then he says there are no such thing as files. And then he says yesterday that the files that were there were created by Obama and Biden magically. And needless to say, the MAGA side is pissed because, and I believe it's two reasons. One, I believe a lot of them genuinely are concerned about the welfare of children. I think that is legitimate, and they are mad that this may have happened by the most powerful people in America, if true. But there's the other side of this where they need their conspiracy theory validated. There's a dire need for that because they have wrapped their entire political lives and in some cases identities around being a supporter of the conspiracy theory. So what's happening is to wrap it up, Congress is being called out by members of MAGA saying you will release everything. We don't care if Trump's on there or not. Trump is going out of his way, calling social media influencers on the right, calling members of Congress saying you will not allow this to be released, which makes him look hella guilty. And something is going to have to give here because it's not going away. He's tried everything to create distractions. It's not going away.
Yeah, I mean, he's tweeting or truth socially, and he's sending out his truths about, stop talking about Epstein
Yep.
and whatnot. And Epstein, have you ever been to St. Thomas, Bobby?
No, I have not.
So I've been to St. Thomas, a couple times on vacation, and you can see that, Epstein's island. So he bought this, I don't know how many acres it is, but it's visible. It's maybe a mile or so kind of offshore from St. Thomas, and so certain beaches you can see, and everyone's like, "Yep, that's Epstein's island," and it looks like you can sort of see some compounds of buildings up there and whatnot, but you can't really see. I mean, it looks like uh, almost like sort of a deserted island. I mean, there are some parts where you can see some buildings, and what he would do is fly these underage girls that Ghislaine Maxwell would recruit. I don't think they knew exactly what they were being recruited for from parts of Florida. Hey, you're going to be a masseuse, and we're going to pay you this money, and underage girls, really, and they'd fly him down there and force them to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein, and there were a variety of other individuals who went along on this. The big one being Trump. I mean, there's interviews with Epstein with Michael Wolff in his book where he's saying, "Hey, Donald, this is 2017, 2018, kind of before all this breaks, where they're talking about where Jeffrey Epstein is basically vouching that Donald Trump is one of his best friends. There's this quote that, the first time he hooked up with Melania was on his private jet. I mean, they were tight, uh, they were in cahoots. And so it's very obvious that why Donald Trump would not want these files, if they exist, to be released. And it's caused this stir in the MAGA world because um, I think that this is a really foundational belief by a lot of people on the right that whether it's true or not, many of them truly believe that they are kind of crusading against child abuse and pedophilia and all these things. I mean, this goes back a long way. It didn't start with Trump. This has been kind of part of the right's identity now for a long time, and it's really started with backlash against gay people and gay marriage and things like that. So it's really it's really interesting to see the interests of Donald Trump in covering up what are most likely sex crimes committed by Donald Trump, and the collision between that and this sort of identity that's so instrumental to MAGA.
It's amazing that the effort of which he's applying to cover this up is next level, right? And don't get me wrong, this man has covered up stuff before in the past. We all know that, but this, I think, we can blast Trump for a lot of things, but you cannot blast the fact that he has a political intuition that is better than the average person. That's why he has been elected president twice. And I think his intuition is telling him if this gets out, he is not only through, but the backlash could ruin him, will ruin him. And I honestly believe if this does come out and all the stuff that we all believe is there implicates him, you will see the greatest fall of an American citizen in our history. I really do. I
I'm gonna
really
have to
do.
disagree a little bit, man.
Why?
I hope that is the case. Here's the issue: Trump has like skated. I mean, the dude was found not guilty. He was found uh
Liable.
liable for committing sexual assault for rape, essentially,
Yep.
of E. Jean Carroll.
Yep.
He, has multiple instances of him talking in language, grab him by the pussy, right? Like these are all things. It's kind of baked in with him. I think I hope you're right. It would be wonderful if you're right, but I don't know that you are. Like I think that in the end of the day, most parts of MAGA are gonna, roll over and say, hey, this is who the guy is, but he's still our guy. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But it's interesting to hear for the first time, sort of some existential angst about, some doubts about Trump. And not from, the election was swung, the 24 election was swung by a couple 100,000 people who were concerned about inflation. Right?
Right.
That's not who's having the doubts now. It's the hardcore MAGAverse who are like, wait a second. Epstein was like, we thought Epstein was, we were going to get this dump of files that were about Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew, and why are we not releasing it? So, the person caught in the middle, hilariously, is Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, who is, facing this. Of course, they can't blame Trump, right? They got to blame it
Right.
on someone else, so they're blaming it on Bondi. But
Right.
Bobby, what are your thoughts in general on, I guess, conspiratorial thinking? Like, I mean, not just about this and not just about MAGA, but what is it about conspiracies? We faked the moon landing, 9/11 was an inside job, like all these sorts of conspiracies that kind of exist out there. I mean, do you know anyone who's a conspiracy theorist? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, oh, heck, man, you know as well as I do. If you serve in the military, any point of time, you're gonna find one or two dudes in your unit. They're like, man, this is a conspiracy. And da 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 da. I think, don't get me wrong. I think you should question everything that you see, but I also think conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists, those who engage in them, I think they germinate from a point of view where something has happened or something happens where it disrupts your perception of the world. And in order to justify that perception, you need something that seems intricate and coordinated. Because if not, if you have to accept something at face value, um, then all of a sudden the way you have been thinking is now nullified. And this goes to ego. So, for example, flat earthers. Now, we have launched satellites into orbit. We know the world is round. We see it. Pilots fly over the horizon every day to make this happen. We know it's the thing, right? But even going back to when that theory was starting to be debunked, right? The acceptance of the world not being the way you perceive it, it literally goes to you were at the whim of nature and not the other way around. And people have a hard time dealing with that because we operate. I mean, think about it. Humans, our default is to operate from we are the center and everything else revolves around us, right? When we found out the world was round and the earth rotates around the sun, not the other way around, the church called it heresy. The church said it was wrong and literally killed people like Galileo for espousing different. So if they're doing this in the age of, quote, enlightenment, unquote, it should not shock you that today you will have people like, well, yeah, the moon landing was fake, blah, blah, blah. Never mind the fact that people literally witnessed the rocket, Apollo 11 go into outer space with their own eyes. Never mind the fact that you had sailors watch this thing, watch their landing capsule come back down. Never mind the fact that you have all of this stuff they brought back that can't be found on the planet. Never mind any of that. Never mind any of that. The fact that we could do something like that blew the minds of certain individuals. Right. And then once you have a narrative, you look for the breadcrumbs to create the supporting evidence. And so the narrative has to start with you not accepting something and then the breadcrumbs that are necessary to justify it. And then you present it. This is the key part. You present it to the most ill-informed, least educated, least scientific method thinking people you can find, and become an echo chamber. That's what
I think
happens.
that I think that's right. I also think there's um a psychological aspect. There so when people have looked at this sort of scientifically and studied people who believe in conspiracy theories. So I read this article kind of when I knew that this is what we wanted to talk about today in a journal, a psychology journal, and they had done this big meta analysis. So if you don't know what a meta analysis is, it's when let's say I do a study on I don't know, fluoride in drinking water, and then Bobby does the study on fluoride and drinking water. And then so a meta analysis would be a third person taking the data from our two studies and pooling them together and figuring out, the fluoride in drinking water, right? So they did a meta analysis of all these studies of conspiracy theorists in the United States. I think they had like 150,000 kind of participants when they included all these studies. And so they drew the conclusion that it's really sort of twofold. There's a personality trait, like there's a type of people, a type of person who believes in conspiracy theories. Um, and it's really rooted in kind of a need to sort of understand the world around them and feel safe by understanding the world around them, right? So it's and it's very, to me it seems very human, right? Like we're trained, not trained rather, that we're born with this ability, with this personality trait where you're looking at the field and you can see the outline of the tiger in the field even though the tiger's camouflaged to try to blend into the field, right? So we are trained, our minds have trained over millennia. We've evolved to be able to see patterns, and so we see patterns sometimes even when there are no patterns. And the other thing that this psychological study found is that people enjoy being part of essentially a community of fellow conspiracy believers, right? Like, so it's twofold. It's like, hey, I believe in conspiracies because I'm the type of person who believes in conspiracies and they make me feel like I understand the world around me. But also, it's kind of fun to believe in conspiracies because you get to talk about, they rigged the twin towers to blow up or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, it,
Right. Well,
it
it's funny you mentioned that too. Part of the conspiracy theory mindset, in my opinion, is to be the smartest person in the room.
yes,
You know what I'm saying? People who typically think about it, the conspiracy theories and usually take root amongst the least educated of a population.
a lot of times.
A lot of times. And so what happens is they come up with something elaborate and immediately they're over there thinking in 3D chess and you're over here playing checkers. It gives that boost mentally that, hey, I may not have the parchment that you have. I may not have the job that you have, but I have common sense and I'm thinking better at a higher level than you are. And so you mentioned 9/11 and the collapses of the towers and the building around it and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, think about the amount of hours that were used on that. Part of the thing that I've always thought about, specifically that theory, that conspiracy theory, and a couple of others, do you really think the way that the government leaks information even today, that all of this would have been kept drum tight, close hold secret over 25 years? I mean, seriously?
Bobby, that's the best point, dude. I could not, like, I worked for the government. I had a top secret clearance. You worked for the government.
Yep.
You had a top secret
Yep.
clearance. The government can't keep shit secret, man.
No.
After we killed bin Laden, it took what, like 2 weeks
Yep.
before fucking Rob O'Neill was
Robert O'Neill
like,
was like, I'm the guy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the government can't keep a secret. You think they can keep a secret about like murdering 3,000 American citizens? Like it makes
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
right. It makes no sense. I mean, there was a conspiracy on 9/11. The conspiracy was there were 19 hijackers. who got on a plane and crashed them into a bunch of buildings, right? There's no, you don't need a conspiracy from the American government. It's like Al Qaeda had his conspiracy. Um, yeah, it's a really interesting mindset, and you know, I wonder if, and I'd love to hear some comments from the listeners, but
Yeah.
I feel like no one sort of just believes in one conspiracy, right?
No,
I mean,
no.
like you're
That's
not,
also a valid point.
yeah, like you're not like totally normal and then you just happen to think 9/11 was an inside job.
Right.
You might think, "Oh, hey, what's the chemtrails, like these people see
Yep.
jets
Yep.
flying and they're like
Yep.
they're spraying chemicals on us."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um
Because they
is
don't
that
have a basic
real?
understanding of science.
Right, like,
Just-
you don't understand what contrails are, so you come up with your own theory,
right.
I'm on the ground and I'm looking up at the sky and I see what looks like exhaust,
Hmm.
and, oh, that has to be the government, spraying
Right.
chemicals to
Right.
keep me in
To,
check.
to, 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 to show you how pervasive this has become, Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday just bragged about how she is proposing a House bill to basically stop the modification of weather, the
Yeah.
human modification of weather. I watched her announcement twice, Dan, to process that this is a person, the one that did the Jewish space laser thing, to
Right.
remind people
Yeah,
this is,
that was like she thought they were starting fires, right? And so
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, orbiting space lasers that started wildfires. She is a sitting member of Congress. Out of
Yep.
300 and almost 40 million people, she is one of the 535 that are selected to represent the rest of us. I'm like, this is the best we can do. This is the best we can do.
Yeah, and I for some people, not all of her voters, but for some of her voters, that was why they voted for her, right?
Yes.
Because, like, it
Yes.
wasn't, they weren't sort of holding their nose necessarily. I mean, that's your neck of the woods, man. But like, some percentage of her voters were like, these Jewish space lasers, there's something to this. And I'm gonna vote for Mars because she gets it. And, um, it's really, and it's compounded by the fact, I will say this, it's compounded by the fact that occasionally, very rarely, there is some kind of like terrible government thing that happens. I mean, the thing that crops to mind for me immediately is like the Tuskegee experiment, right? And, which we teach all medical students, learn about Tuskegee and there were, if you don't know what happened in Tuskegee, essentially there was a decades long study in Alabama, where the public health service was doing a study on syphilis, and it specifically in African American males. I think the actual name of the study is syphilis in the Negro male or something like that, and it basically, they wanted to see what, they were trying to describe and categorize the natural progression of syphilis, which eventually, so syphilis, it starts out, it's an STD. It starts out with these kind of lesions on your genitals. Then there's secondary syphilis where you can get like a rash, full body, and then eventually it progresses to neurosyphilis where it gets into your brain and, ultimately you can die from it. And so the on the surface of it, when they conceived of the study, there wasn't necessarily anything ethically wrong with it because they didn't know that penicillin was out there, right? The problem was about 10 years, I think it was less, I think it was like 5 or 6 years into the study, we discovered, meaning we like global health, we discovered that penicillin cured syphilis. In fact, penicillin, like pure penicillin, is still the treatment for syphilis today. Like if one came into the ER and you had it's one of the only diseases where we still use penicillin as opposed to modern versions, methicillin or nafcillin or whatever it is. So they figured out how to cure syphilis, but for these, hundreds of men who were in the study, who were enrolled in the study, they didn't treat them. And so they just let them die eventually of syphilis over years, knowing that there was an effective treatment that, you can take literally one dose of penicillin, one big dose of penicillin, and you're cured. And the US government, um, the researchers who were doing this study did not end the study and say, "Hey guys, we have a treatment now, so let's get you all some penicillin and thanks," right? Like, and so that didn't happen. And it went on until there were actually some Jewish scientists who, in the years after the Holocaust and the horrors coming out of the Holocaust and the death camps, and the Nazi scientific medical experiments, these Jewish scientists were like, "We're going to blow the whistle on Tuskegee," and they did, and that led to all sorts of changes in how we do medical research in the United States. But it also not only led to these changes, I would imagine, I don't want to put words in your mouth or anyone else's mouth, but there is a somewhat of a distrust with African Americans and medical science.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
you know, and
Absolutely.
and it's at least in part, probably in a large part, because of Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks too, which is a
I
lot
was
of
about to say, and here at Alex, I was about to mention her too,
yeah.
but you're absolutely right. There is a distrust of medical. Well, you're right. It's not just these major things, but little things like you can look at surveys. You're in the medical field. When African Americans go into the emergency room, their symptoms, their pain threshold, all this is treated with less urgency than any other demographic.
Less pain medicine. Yep.
Yes, less pain medicine. When you look at the infant mortality rate in the United States, it's highest amongst African American women. Death in childbirth, et cetera, et cetera. These are the facts. And see, this right here, to me, is separate from a conspiracy because we have facts to back it up. There are things that have happened factually. And we're not talking like hundreds of years ago. We're talking here in a lifetime, my parents' lifetime, my lifetime, where we have data that shows we are treated differently by the medical community. That is different. That is different than hearing about the COVID vaccinations and all these other various things that people are associating with, or vaccines and autism. These are completely different levels of thinking. And I think one of the reasons conspiracies are so popular in American culture today is because people love to intertwine the two. Factual things that happen and then perceived things that happen overlap. And it's interesting. The final point I'll make on this, it's interesting how prevalent it is in the medical community more than any other community, where you guys are the most published people when it comes to y'all's subject matters than any other profession in America.
That's a really interesting thread. So I would, that you just made me think, man. So I
Yeah, I'm
would
sorry to drop that on you.
imagine, yeah, I would imagine that conspiracy theories align pretty closely with there's one group of experts in whatever, right? So, the generals at the Pentagon, the CDC, NASA, the 9/11 Commission, whatever it is, right? There's this group of people who understand a subject. I mean, I think the best example is COVID, right? Like Anthony Fauci, um, is the greatest virologist probably America's ever had. Maybe, I mean, maybe you could throw Jonas Salk on the list, but he was the person who led the government investigation into HIV and AIDS back in the 80s. I mean, you don't get someone with more institutional knowledge than this guy, and he was pilloried because uh he had an understanding of the subject matter that, John Q. Public just doesn't have. And when you're asking a group who doesn't understand why you're being asked to do something, it's tough. And part of your job as an expert is you have to be able to explain, this. right? Like, so it's like in medicine, we see this a lot, right? Like, we're not supposed to use, um, if I have a patient, unfortunately, and somebody dies in a car accident, and we work on them, and we try to get them back, and we're unable to, and then the wife or father or son or whoever's in the waiting room, a big thing when you go and break the news to them is you're not supposed to say, you're not supposed to use sort of euphemisms, right? You don't say he passed away or he succumbed to his injuries, or it's like, I'm sorry, I hate to say this, but your father died. And you have to it's part of your job when you have expertise in something to be able to break it down for somebody who doesn't have expertise in that issue. um and a lot of times in the Navy, for example, I remember, you probably have some experience with this, but I remember there were certain times where it's like, "Hey, the rule is blah blah blah," and then you ask a question, you're like, "Well, why is that the rule?" And they just say, "Well, the rules are written in blood," which is true, but is not necessarily like a great explanation. I mean, can you think of any from your naval career? Like,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll give a very simple, like basic seamanship where they tell you not to walk over lines, which are ropes on the
yeah,
ship,
yep,
right? And, people, when you see people join the Navy for the first time, they're like, well, why do we got to step over? Why can't we step over it? It makes sense, blah, blah. And then they're like, because if the line snaps, it'll take your leg off, et cetera, et
yep,
cetera. Now, this is a factual
yeah,
statement,
yeah,
right? But for someone who just left boot camp, who just reported to their first ship, it's like, dude, we mean this. We have to hammer it into them, and they have to kind of take your word for it until
yeah.
they have an incident where they see lines possibly pop, not snap, but pop, and you see the amount of force. All of a sudden, it's no longer a conspiracy,
What's the
right?
difference between snap and pop?
So like when a line snaps, it parts. Like it literally will part, split, and fly off at great force, and literally will just cut anything that's in front of it
Okay.
because
Yep.
the diameter of these lines are thick and heavy. Popping is when the ship may be moored to the side of a pier, and the tide changes and stuff like that, and they're settled. But the lines move on the chalk or the bit that it's on, and it may pop, and you hear this loud poof or poof, you know what I'm saying? And it's not something that's dangerous because the line is designed to have a certain amount of give, due to the tonnage of the ship. But it's the first time you realize, oh my God, those lines are yeah, it's a lot of force. These lines are holding tons, thousands of tons to the side of a pier. And then you think to yourself, if that line was to snap, it would go right through me, which has happened. And so it goes from a conspiracy to being factual, right? Because now you've gained the knowledge to have the perspective of what you're looking at. I think the reason in the medical field in particular, you guys deal with more conspiracy theories than I think anybody else is because the average American, the average person, but definitely the average American, does not come anywhere close to having the knowledge bank to have a medical level of expertise in their mind. We don't. That's why y'all have to go through years and really decades of schooling to become doctors in your field. And so when something is so unrelatable, the average person is like, well, how can I rationalize this in my mind? Like, for example, going back to what you said about penicillin and stuff, you're telling me this dosage of things I can't even see unless I have a microscope is going to go into my body and magically make this stuff go away.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's the conspiracy theories. I mean, healthcare is not front and center right now. We've come out of the COVID era, but the conspiracy theories that we see in politics, and back to what we were originally talking about, the the conspiracy theories kind of around how Democrats are child molesters, and these sorts of things, which of course not every Republican thinks that, right? But some do. And it the Pizzagate thing, you remember that Pizzagate? That was sort of the big, that was this conspiracy theory in Trump's first term, pretty early, but some guy, was spending a lot of time on Facebook, and then he thought that there was some pizza like bowling alley up in DC that was an underground dungeon for children, right? And so drove up to DC and goes in with an AR-15, and like he doesn't shoot anybody, but he starts shooting off the locks on all the closets and whatnot in order to find these missing children. And then he's like, ah, shit, like I was wrong. This is a storage closet. And I mean, really, the best example is like the election, right? Like the 2020 election and January 6th and all that stuff. I mean, it's so much easier for, if you're the type of person who believes in conspiracies, to um, rationalize that if Donald Trump lost the election, who was the guy I voted for, there's no way he could have straight up lost it, right? Like it must have been some conspiracy. And then, oh, by the way, I'm surrounded by like-minded individuals, and it feels good to be on the inside, right?
That part.
Yeah.
Access. The having being the person with the secret and understanding stuff that no one else knows, feeling special because of it. Again, it goes back to feeding the ego. Something that's interesting to me, I find that conspiracy theories take root in individuals and in society where fallibility is seen as the worst thing that can ever happen to you. Being wrong, making a mistake. That is fertile ground for conspiracy theories to take hold because you have no give. You don't allow someone else to, no kidding, grow and mature and gain that knowledge that we're talking about. And then knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. You don't have knowledge. You're not allowing yourself to have experience because of your theories. So now you're not going to have any wisdom. It all builds on one another. And so when people look at what's going on with MAGA, for example, right? How is it that these various theories, Obama wasn't born here, the Epstein files, and how is this happening? It's being planted in fertile soil.
No, it's deliberate for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
there I don't think Donald Trump sits around and necessarily says, "Hey, let's start a rumor that Mikey Sherrill is a pedophile or
Right.
whatever." But like
Right.
I do think Donald Trump very much recognizes that if those rumors are out there, that's helpful to him,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so, it's independence of thought, guys. Like that is, and one of the things, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I believe in coincidences, and
Right.
coincidences are a much harder thing to believe in sometimes.
Yep.
And it's not naive to say that. I mean, sometimes two things seem connected and they're just not,
Right.
right? And I see this every day in my job. I had it yesterday. I had a patient. I'm going to change some of the details, but patient came in with leg pain
Yep.
and also, a runny nose, and was like, "What? How are these connected?" And I'm like, "They're not. They're not connected at all." you know, you have two different things that are going on, right? Your leg hurts and you've got a runny nose, and those are happening at the same time, but they are not connected. And it's amazing to me that some people like can't
Right.
take that leap that these two things are not connected, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's wild. So the conspiracy stuff, I think being an independent thinker and being an independent person and really having not just intellectual freedom, but personal freedom is really involves being critical about facts as they are presented, right? But at the same time, recognizing that sometimes there are areas of life where you don't have the answers and you should listen to the experts, right?
Uh,
Like,
right. I take it like I take it. I'll tell you like this. It's interesting. I've been thinking about this for a while. I think group effort is the most powerful thing human beings can do, and I also think group think is the most crippling thing humans suffer from.
yeah,
Right. And so when you look at conspiracy theories, group think is basically the amplifier of it. It's people finding the echo chamber, et cetera, et cetera. How many times have we seen an accident, a human created accident, whether a ship running aground or, natural disasters being made worse because somewhere in that Swiss cheese model of
Yeah.
everything going to shit.
Explain what the Swiss cheese is
Right.
for
Okay. Yeah. So Swiss cheese model, we talk about this all the time in the military. It's where you have something that happened, a mishap, a mistake, an event, some disaster, right? And all it takes is one person in the chain of events, the timeline of events, to say this doesn't make sense. So imagine a block of Swiss cheese. For the disaster to take place, all these things have to wind through perfectly and get through for it to happen. When all it takes is one piece of cheese to say, wait a minute, stop. And the chain event stops and disaster is averted. So the problem that we run into as people, especially in groupthink environments, is people see something wrong, but they're not going to be the person to speak up and say it. They have critically looked at this, and this definitely has happened in the Trump administration multiple times, especially that first term where you had subject matter experts in those roles like Jim Mattis, Rex Tillerson. They're like, wait, no, we're not doing that. And they were the block of cheese that filled that hole that stopped something disastrous happening. Now you have the most holy piece of cheese in Washington and forever, in my mind, right? Because you have enablers who are loyalists that are not subject matter experts that are allowing this to happen. So, for example, if you use the Epstein files as an example, hey, all it takes is one person be like, we're releasing the files and release them. They're not going to. They're not going to. So now within the administration, you have complete compliance. But for the first time since Trump has been in office this second term, you're seeing Congress saying, wait a minute, we need this released. The Speaker of the House, who has been in lockstep with Trump during this administration, Mike Johnson, is saying, hey, we need to put everything out there. You know why? Because people are beating up his phone line and switchboard down there in
Yep.
Louisiana. Okay. These
And by the
people
way,
are
if you
locked on
happen to
this.
live in Louisiana, please continue to beat up his phone line.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I mean, but it's not just him. I mean, you have
yeah,
various members of the Republican Party, the MAGA side of the Republican Party, who in the last 72 hours have been just lambasted by this. And it's going to get worse the longer they stall. And every time Trump comes up with a new excuse not to release stuff, it's going to get worse. And I mean total release, because they had various things put out before. They had social media influencers come to the White House, and it was just basically stuff that they'd already knew in a fancy binder. These people now were going to be thorough with this. And I honestly believe, and this is where I find this fascinating, I honestly believe that they are willing to absorb that Trump will be on that, in that list, other Republicans. It won't matter. It won't matter to them as long as they get the information.
yeah, and you know what, Bobby? What's interesting to me is I think that some events, right? Some disasters, whatever it is, they don't result in conspiracy theories. And I wonder why that is. Like, so for example, I'm trying to think of I don't know, the Challenger disaster when we were kids, right? So the space shuttle blows up. And what was it about the Challenger disaster that happened either in the accountability of it or in the public consciousness that just made it so there people didn't come up with this Yahoo theory that this was all a plot to kill Krista McAuliffe,
I,
right?
I,
Like,
wow. I think two things. It's funny you say that. I literally just watched a documentary on that whole thing about
yes,
maybe 3 months ago. Now looking at it as an adult, not the kid in class, like, oh my God,
yeah,
two things I think work in favor of it not having conspiracy theories germinate. Number one, NASA especially at that time, was one of the most trusted American institutions we had. Along with the military, they had landed on the moon. They had put a space station up. The space station had just fallen. And now they are, the space shuttle, regular travel to space. They were on this constant trajectory of success after the initial failures of Mercury and Apollo and the explosions. They were on a roll, right? So that's number one. Number two, the nature of how NASA operates and how it was presented publicly. Very analytical, very detail oriented, very transparent when things would go wrong. I mean, Congress would call them to the carpet. I think those things gave Americans the mindset of give them a benefit of a doubt because what they're trying to do is hard as hell.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, I
think
think you're
that's
right. I think
different.
there's some degree of accountability
Yep.
that public accountability that really does make a difference. I mean, you can think about pick a disaster, right? And it would be so easy to come up with a conspiracy theory about any of them. But what people say sort of after the fact can really go a long way towards dissuading these crazy beliefs. And I think that's the problem with Epstein, right? Is just really, like just
Right.
if there's nothing to see, man, then just release them, right? And so that's the I'm not saying I feel sympathy for MAGA because trust me, I don't. But I do think that the I can see how that would be a hard thing for them to kind of swallow, especially if your identity is so caught up in this kind of straw man belief that you're protecting children, um,
Right.
by voting for MAGA, who, elected as their president, Donald Trump. So yeah, interesting stuff, man. The conspiracy stuff is, I mean, it's kind of fun with sports, right?
Right.
That
Right.
the Mavericks somehow got the top draft pick. Those
Yeah. After
conspiracies
trading
are
away
fun.
Luca. Right. Right. Well, and here's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up. Medical is probably the number one area where you see conspiracies, followed quickly by number two, sports, right? And I think part of it is because medical and sports directly impacts people's lives, whether it's entertainment in sports or living in medical. And here's the thing about sports. Sports is supposed to be equal opportunity, the most equal opportunity thing we have. Right. And so let's use what you just said. The NBA draft this past year, Cooper Flag goes to Dallas after Dallas trades Luka Doncic, a generational player, to their second largest market in LA, Los Angeles. Everybody's sitting there telling you that that is the dumbest trade in the history of the National Basketball Association. And then magically, with a 1.6% chance, the Dallas Mavericks get another generational player by hooking up the Los Angeles Lakers. You can't make that up. Just like when New York was struggling in the 80s in the first draft lottery, the frozen envelope, you get Patrick Ewing, a generational player for your number one market. So logic goes out the window. Now, granted, is it possible that could happen? Of course it is. I mean, it happened to the Spurs multiple times. The San Antonio Spurs, which is the smallest market, has had how many number one draft picks because that's how the ping pong balls dropped. It's statistics. But at the same time, if I'm a player or a fan of the National Basketball Association, I look around, I'm like, how the hell is this possible? I'll even expound on that. The Atlanta Hawks, who got the number one pick last year, my team, we get the number one pick in the draft for the first time in our entire history. And that's a 60, 70-year history. And it's the one draft where there's not a standout player. They're like, oh, yeah, give it to Atlanta. No one cares. Because there's a conspiracy theory in Atlanta that the NBA hates Atlanta because all the players love to live here but don't want to play here, all this other kind of stuff. So it's a lot of social conditioning, environmental observation, and the simplest thing to do is to say it's rigged. And with Donald Trump in the White House, that has become a narrative in America like we've never seen before.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And there's maybe it starts. I wonder what percentage of like real conspiracy theorists, think it's kind of fun and silly at the start of it, and then over time really
That's
kind of come and sort of interpret this as no, this is real, right? Like,
right.
no, the NBA really, Adam
No,
Silver.
I think that's a legitimate. I think that is a very legitimate point. I mean, and the NBA and the NFL are the notorious ones for this because, perfect example in NFL, Kansas City Chiefs get all the calls. I mean, the memes about the refs wearing Kansas City Chiefs uniforms, stuff like that, because it seems like in crunch time, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and the Kansas City Chiefs get every call. Ask any Buffalo fan that. Ask any
Right.
Baltimore fan that. And I'm going to be honest with you. They're right. They're right. They get
Yeah.
every benefit of a flag, especially in the playoffs. Kansas City gets it. You have to just beat them into submission because if the game is close, we're not gonna win
Right.
it. When we played at Navy, when I played at Navy, and we played Notre Dame every year, and we were in the middle of that 40-year losing streak, right? I'll never forget. Our coaches would tell us, especially when we go to Notre Dame to play, you cannot have this a close game. If it's a close game, the refs will figure out a way to screw us over. And junior year, our second class year, that's exactly what happened. 4th and 8, and we stop them 7 yards. 7 yards or 1 yard short. And what happens instead? They get an extra yard on the placement of the ball and they win the game. I'll never forget it as long as I live. And I believe that was a conspiracy. I believe in
The rest were
conspiracy theory.
Catholic, man. The rest were Catholic. Well, thanks, guys. That's a great place to end, but hope you enjoyed the conversation. Conspiracies, it's as American as apple pie and unfortunate in some ways. But the one of the problems with conspiracies is every so often, you get one that's got some truth to it. And
Yep.
whether it's Tuskegee or the Epstein files, the best thing the purvey or the person or institution who's involved in this potential conspiracy, the best thing to do is just release all the facts, like
Yep.
NASA did in 86, like NASA did. And when did Columbia blow up? Like 99, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
99. Huh?
Yeah. So, I mean, the having transparency is really important in maintaining public trust. So, thanks for listening, guys. And please leave comments. I'm sure you guys have thoughts about conspiracy theories in general, and we'd love to hear
Yeah, but I definitely want to hear them.
them.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Bobby. Good
Yep.
times.